College Station. Welcome to the Beliucci Hour Lunch live on Sports Radio 1150 The Zone 102.7 FM. I am your host, Ryan Broninger, from here at the Tap on Harvey Road, as we are every Monday and Thursday to talk all things Aggie sports from noon to 1. We will be hanging out and getting you guys updated on the weekend and the week ahead in Texas A&M athletics. Don't forget, Monday nights here at the Tap is karaoke. Wednesday nights, piano bar. Tuesdays and Fridays, crawfish starting at 6 p.m. And if you're driving around looking for a place to come grab lunch, come check out the Tap's great lunch specials. $8.49 burger basket, $8.49 chicken BLT, I believe, today. So thank you guys for tuning in. If you're catching us on our live stream on YouTube, we appreciate that as well. Front tables here, they've got some reading material that they've been brought. I'm sure Luge will get a big kick out of that, see how prepared they are for this Saturday's spring game, Texas A&M Maroon and White game, the second one under head coach Jimbo Fisher. And I think there's some storylines that a lot of people will be very interested in. I don't know that, the frontline guys. I think there's some offensive positions where they're up for grabs, especially on the offensive line. I think folks will be really interested to see who trots out there with this first team, at least who's impressed enough, Coach Josh Henson, enough this spring to be trotted out there with that first-team offensive line. I think the backup quarterback will be a lot will be written and gleaned about that, probably too much from one performance that we've seen out of the entire spring. One guy will have a really good game, and I'm sure get himself thrust in the fans' mind to the front of the line to back up Kellen Mond next fall. But I want to get Luch's thoughts on that, and then just whatever he's got on his mind as the Aggies enter their final week of spring. And a team that's been a little beat up. I don't think it's anything serious, but I think that team's been a little beat up, kind of bumps and bruises. So another thing will be really interesting to see who's held out on Saturday and who will actually participate and compete. I know that there for a little bit the receiver group was pretty banged up, but it was, again, nothing major, just kind of some bumps, bruises, and nicks, and hopefully these guys will be back to finish the spring. Aggie baseball on the road all week last week, won Tuesday in Austin, and then lost the series in Baton Rouge. Played one game on Friday, lost a 2-1 affair, and then played two games on Saturday to avoid weather that didn't really show up until late Sunday in Baton Rouge, but split a doubleheader on Saturday. Really, to me, it felt like the only game that LSU outplayed A&M was that second game on Saturday. I thought the Aggies outplayed LSU in Game 1 and 2 of the series. Game 1, you had an unfortunate kind of a double error, essentially, in right field that cost you a run. And then LSU gets a solo home run in the bottom of the 8th. Now, the offense for A&M didn't play well, but you're going against one of the premier arms in the SEC in Zach Hess. And I thought A&M had opportunities to put the game away early, and really in the early to middle innings had some chances to put Hess on the ropes and get into the LSU bullpen. They were unable to do that, and it's a credit to Hess. He's a great pitcher. But, again, when I went back and looked at the series on a whole, just thought A&M played better than LSU. It doesn't always happen. It doesn't always translate into you winning series, especially on the road in this conference. And the front table guys were asking, what's it going to take, the rest of the year? I mean, how many series will A&M win? How many will they lose? And really, I guess the fair answer would be about half. Like, the conference is so good. The new D1 baseball poll came out today, and I think, was it 6 of the top 15 were SEC teams? I've got it right here. Let me find this poll. I should have pulled it up before the show started. But just continues to be an absolute bear of a schedule, and it doesn't get any easier, but everybody's still jumbled up right there together in the conference. A&M at 7-4-1. The rest of the I think there's 3 other teams at 8-4 in the West. The East has got a little bit more separation, but it's just every week is going to be like it was in Baton Rouge. And there's no sin in losing that series, but when you felt like you played better than LSU did 2 of those 3 games, it would have been really a feather in the Aggies' cap, especially their postseason resume, if they would have won that series. Luch, look what we've got. Front table brought reading material. Laminated, or it's not laminated, but it's on good paper. Mm-hmm. And then they even brought you a practice schedule.
Okay, why did they bring me that?
Because they need
1 week of practice left.
Well, let me tell you something. The first thing they asked me about when I walked in was the deep snapper. Okay. That's the first thing they asked me about.
That's a good question, and you know what? You've stumped me. I'm going to have to go do my research
on the
that
deep
one.
snapper.
Yeah.
They're seriously concerned about who they got coming in deep snap. It's
an important position, and you had a guy that,
right,
that didn't have
really
a bad snap his whole career. So, yeah, you certainly you look at a guy like Don Muehlbach or Weeks with the Texans, who I saw at Leck's retirement party last weekend. Those guys are. Once you get one, you want to hang on to them as long as you can.
Once they screw up,
if this was an NFL team, A&M would have had that guy for the next 15 years. So, it's a big position. I'll check into that today.
Just any updates on some storylines in the spring? I know they were beat up. Nothing serious, but you think the participation level on Saturday will be a little bit lower than we anticipated?
I don't know. I mean, I don't know what you anticipate. I don't know how to answer that.
Yeah, it's just, are you expecting them to hold a lot of guys out precautionary?
I think there's been a lot of guys out, so I'm just wondering if they're coming back this week. I don't think they're just going to take guys out of the spring game and say, "Hey, don't practice in this 15th practice because we don't want you in this scrimmage." I think they consider that an important practice. It's one of however many scrimmages or those type things they have, competitive practices. So I don't think they're going to I don't think Jimbo's going to want go and say, "Hey, you've played a lot. We're going to pull you out," and things like that. So
the storylines I think are still very much the same as they were when they started the spring because nobody's seen them in public enough.
Mm-hmm.
But what I always hesitate with spring games is that people will overreact. And one of the key things I think people are going to be looking for is what's going on at that backup quarterback spot.
Yeah.
And so one of those three guys may play great, but I don't think and it'll be assumptions will be drawn because of that. But
which would be ignorant.
Right, because that would be the only time we've seen them for an extended period of time over the course of the spring.
Now, if one of them plays great, I do think there's something to be gained from that. It just doesn't mean that the everything that happened over spring is thrown away. But to play great in that setting would be impressive if someone played great. But if someone was just, hey, he played better than the other guys, I wouldn't read. I don't think in anyone's mind that thing's even close to being done. I think Calzada and what he brings to the table would intrigue me the most for a guy that just got here and can throw it the way he does and kind of feel it the way he does, and you try to kind of project out what could these guys look like by August. But, Blumrick spent a good portion of the spring with the twos, and Foster has made it's very noticeable the strides he's made in a year on campus.
Surprise you how quickly Calzada's come along?
No.
I didn't either.
He's got the mental side, and he can throw it. So I'm not saying he's just made some kind of meteoric rise to where it's his job. And I'm just saying if you made me say what stands out to me, it's his arm. And
man,
stuff.
it's almost imperative now that these quarterbacks come in early. I mean, that's huge for him.
Yeah. Well, for year one.
Right.
Sure.
Yeah. Absolutely. So you get a guy out of high school. I think one of the conversations you have when you find your quarterback needs to be, hey, can you get in here a semester early?
All things being equal, right?
Yep.
Now, if they'd have had Nick Starkel back,
it wouldn't have been that big of a deal.
Then it's not as big a deal because you'd plan on redshirting the guy anyway, and that's essentially what the spring has become for these guys that come in early.
Surprise you now? saw some stuff on social media with Nick. And then Arkansas's been pumping the mic'd up with this other quarterback. I'm surprised that he picked Arkansas. I thought Oklahoma State was I'm not saying he doesn't want to go compete, and he's competed every year that he's been here. But you'd think leaving a place, you want to go somewhere where there's, more of a clear path to you being the starter.
Yeah, I think the SMU thing got him. I think that's where he was going to go, and then they took Buechele, and it kind of screwed the whole thing up. And I don't know what the timing was on that and why he couldn't have beaten him to the punch, if there's a reason why, or if I'm completely wrong on that. That's what I think, though.
That whole dynamic is just, to me, it's a little weird. To see Nick.
Yeah, it feels uncomfortable on a level. The kid Nick has to do what Nick has to do.
Yeah.
And yeah, do I think there would have been clearer paths out there? Yeah, but it's also got to be where does he feel most comfortable? There's probably, I would imagine there was a radius on how far from home he wanted to go, which I would have been probably the same way at that age. I think it kind of just, you looked up one day and he probably woke up one day and was like, oh my God, I'm going to Arkansas. Not in a bad way for him, but it does feel weird. It's almost like you'd rather him not start against A&M and then take over that job and start the rest of the year and do really well. It just doesn't feel.
In the hierarchy of SEC West quarterbacks that are returning, he's probably going to be one of the more talented guys, physically talented guys. I mean, you lose Stidham at Auburn.
Yeah.
Obviously, Tua's back. LSU returns. What's his name?
You lose Stidham. You lose Fitzgerald.
Matt Corral takes over it.
You lose Teamu. In the West, did Arkansas lose a starter? I mean, they didn't really.
Well, yeah, they ran about
anything.
6 quarterbacks.
And so, there's actually a lot. You lost Matty Mock in the East is the big one, but really they return a lot. Matty Mock, Drew Lock.
Yeah, Drew Lock.
Matty Mock, Lock, whatever, same thing. But you return a bunch of quarterbacks in the league. There just aren't a whole lot that were just outstanding, and we've talked about it. And I think Kellen could be heading into the season. Most people would probably have him ranked third in any kind of power ranking with a chance to move into 2.
It's odd how many transfers there may be starting in the league this year.
Yep.
It's the nature of the quarterback position now in college football, and I'm for one am really excited just to see Kellen in the third year as a starter in the second year under Jimbo. That's one thing I'll be looking for on Saturday is what does the decision-making process look like for Kellen now in year 2? And how much quicker is it?
Yeah.
And how much more efficient is it?
Yeah. That's the big thing to me is can he, just speed up the mental clock because he knows the offense backwards and forwards. He really does. He knows what Jimbo expects of him both, in the offseason, in practice, in a game, snap to snap. He's got the respect of the huddle. You see him out there right now. He's a more just walks around more confident. He's more filled out. He's a leader out there. He knows he can get it done. You can see all that. And the thing will be when the game starts, can you eliminate the bad mistakes? And I think that's overblown with how many he had. I do think they were the mistakes of a sophomore quarterback, the mistakes of a guy that was a full-time starter for the first time in his career and was in a new system. I think those were kind of expected with the exception of a couple like fumbles. Can he, cut those down and just be a little bit, more decisive with the football like we saw against Clemson, like we saw against LSU. But I think you saw it in some other games too where I think if you go back and look at like that Mississippi State game, you'll go, oh, he actually threw the ball pretty well.
He threw the ball well against Ole Miss.
Auburn was the one that was tough, but again.
Yeah, but the more people you talk to about the Auburn game, Billy, at least the people I've talked to said it wasn't just Kellen. Said the receivers had a nightmare of a game in terms of knowing where they're supposed to be, getting open, all that kind of stuff.
The physicality got to the entire offense. You saw guys getting whipped on the interior. The physicality got to the entire offense in those 2 weeks of Mississippi State and Auburn. And so, that's going to shake up. That's why they couldn't run the ball with Travion against Mississippi State, so Kellen had to drop back literally 50 times against 2 first-round pass rushers, or one would have been if he didn't blow out his knee. But, the entire offense got checked in those games physically. Now, I thought they did a brilliant job with the screens and the running game against Auburn, and then McCoy got hurt. So my point about Kellen is he was far from perfect last year, but he showed a ton. And these things that we're talking about, you would expect a first-year to second-year starter make those adjustments, especially since last year was his first in the system. And I think we're seeing that out there right now.
A lot more to get to on the other side of the break. You listen to Beliucci Hour Lunch live on The Zone.